Okay, at all the classes here, race car. Cogworks. Cogworks. UAV. Okay. UAV SAR. Metalytics. CubeSat. Hacking a 3D printer. And the embedded security. So I guess while we are waiting, I'll warm them up for you. Yeah, we're waiting for one more class to show up. Yeah. I'll do that. So I'm gonna just warm you up, waiting for the UAV showing up. So what is BWSI? And why is it? How is it transformational? And don't answer. You'll have a chance to write that in your first short writing assignment this weekend. And the next question, I'm just going to pose it to you so you can start to think about it, is that now that you are transformed or you will be transformed, what are you going to do? Okay. So think about that. Good answer. Okay, I think we are all here. UAV class here, okay.
Yeah. Should I introduce you now? Hello, everyone. I'm Rachel Bainbridge. I'm Rachel Bainbridge, and I'm the lead instructor for Embedded Security and Hardware Hacking course. And I'm here today. I'm here today to introduce to you Charlene Stokes from MITRE. I'm also from MITRE. And so Charlene's talk today is on human-machine social systems, and she also established and runs the Human-Machine and Social Systems Lab. Charlene holds a dual PhD in industrial, organizational, and human factors psychology. She recently joined MITRE to grow the human-machine team and expand their innovation bridging activities. Please join me in welcoming Charlene.
Hello, everybody. I assume this is working. You get a thumbs up. It sounds like everybody can hear, hopefully. I'm not used to using these. I think I speak loudly enough, but they need it for recording. So bear with me, and I apologize if I'm deafening to you when I get excited about some of the work that I do. So thank you, Bob, and thank you, everybody, for the opportunity to be here. I'm really excited for two things, right? Just to be able to share the research and the work I do, but also really excited to hear your guys' perspective on this research and the strategy that we have in the federal government, because the work that I focus on is very much looking into the future, 10, 20, 30 years out. As you might imagine, I might be retired by that point, so it's really you guys, right? You guys obviously are going to be that future, and some of the concepts that I'm going to be presenting today are maybe quite different than what you've heard so far, right? Kind of radically different in terms of how we're interacting with this technology. I am, as mentioned, I have a background in human factor psychology, which is, again, the interaction of humans with technology, but also in industrial organizational psychology. That really touches on not only organizations, but at the societal level. How are we interacting with these new technology? And again, no one knows it better than you guys, and possibly my 8-year-old, right? So again, things are changing on such a radical level. And again, I'm not focused on trying to build the new technology. My research focus and what I do on behalf of the federal government, primarily the Defense Department, is very much focusing on how we as human beings are going to interact and how that will change our dynamics with that technology, particularly the social dynamics. Hence the name of both my lab and the talk today, Human-Machine Social artificial systems. And as you can see there in what we're talking about, our vision for our lab is developing and managing the unique relationships envisioned for future quantified users, right? So much data pulling off of us in all kinds of ways, in all kinds of social media, massive amounts of data at this point on us, right? And then what's that like interacting with those machine partners, or more generally, artificial intelligence or machine learning capabilities and algorithms at this point that we're at. So I'm going to go ahead and play a quick video for you. It's actually quite a dated video at this point. But again, what I focus very much on is the future research and development strategy of the Department of Defense, and particularly the whole of federal government now since I've joined MITRE this last year. A little bit more background on me. I was with Air Force Research Labs for 12 years prior to joining MITRE this last year. So again, I had that sole DoD focus for quite a while. But again, that very basic fundamental research level is what I focus at. Please feel free to ask any questions throughout as I play this video, if I can make it happen. I might pause it here and there to point out a few things. And again, I do, hope you all find value, all the different groups find value in the talk, but I believe it's the cognitive assistance folks right here, right? Raise your hand in the red. All right, okay. I'm particularly going to pick on you guys, right? Because again, my understanding of what your group is doing is developing some of that technology that you're going to maybe see here, right? Working as a cognitive assistant agent with humans, right? But again, where I'm going to push you, right, is how is the human, how is the person, as a psychologist, as a social cognitive psychologist, what are the implications of that technology for us, right? Not just can we build the technology, but what does that mean? And again, not just you guys, I open that up to any of you, because again, you guys are far more engrossed in this technology than what I am.
Computational partners activated.
Neural interface engaged. Preferences imported.
He's not here. We're getting close to a link up with the indigenous force. What do you see? Launch UAVs.
Honest feedback.
Reaper 1, on station.
Now pay attention to this analyst and how he's interacting with the system. There's lots of other technology happening here, but what I'll be speaking to is primarily what you see the analyst doing.
Positive ID, 260 degrees, 800 meters.
Target location unknown.
Assessing stress level.
I've got route guidance.
Physiological display activated.
Remember the quantified
Predict another 45 minutes of peak performance.
Lots of information from that analyst that commander has access to.
Right there.
Command authorization.
Target located. Firing.
Alpha 2, clear to proceed.
Hey, sir, how you doing?
Ready on left.
Right here, number three. Number three. Keep coming. Keep coming. Keep coming.
How's your pain, mother? I'm going to take care of you. You're on your way home now.
The training session is completed. After
Yep,
action
that was all
reviews
the
will begin
training session.
immediately with all participants and their computational partners.
Computational partners,
Current
right?
training objectives achieved. Performance record updated. Strengths and
Augmented
weaknesses will
reality.
continue to be addressed in future training simulations.
All right. Oh, great. That's awesome. Glad you guys liked it. Okay.
Computational partners
Let me make sure I get
activated.
this off first.
Neural interface engaged. Preferences
It's
imported.
replaying. 1 second. Okay, I have a couple of okay, things are freezing. I have a couple of things to point out or to talk about. Obviously, there's that analyst that I pointed out, right, and some of the aspects about that, and then there was the training session, right? So those, as I go through my talk today, you'll see are kind of the two topic areas that when that video came out, I was a government scientist, right? That video was produced by the Office of the Secretary of Defense out of the Pentagon to inspire not only government scientists such as myself, but folks around the world and in terms of who's pushing technology, including our NATO partners, right, so are fully around the world, to try to understand what our future might be and to inspire us to get there. So again, there are 2 points when I watched that video many years ago that caught my attention. As I said, the cognitive analyst section, working with an analyst, right, and assessing that stress level. And for me, I was like, is that accurate? How does that analyst feel when it's an automated system telling him, even if it's mitigated through a commander, if it's an automated system saying that you're too stressed and we need you to take a break right now? How does that impact him, right? Those are all unanswered questions. The other aspect, again, I focus on industrial organizational psychology, which a huge part of that is motivation and training theory. So obviously the training theory, at the very end there, if you notice, it all went away and it showed that this was all just a training activity, which means that all that data, including the stress levels of that analyst that was participating in that training system, is recorded, captured, and informed and tracked, right? And then again, you saw that very intimate connection, which was on one hand a little creepy, right? But on another hand, who knows what the future is going to be like, right? Where it was just an avatar of themselves in an augmented reality, conveying a report back to them. Again, those are very unique relationships, right? Those are relationships we haven't seen before. Those are relationships that we may see in the future, and again, as this is intended to do, is inspire the government scientists and scientists all around the world to try to think beyond, try to think what that future entails. Now again, this is about 5 years old, so a lot of this, when they produced this out of the Pentagon, out of the R&D office, a lot of this was inspired by some current activities happening, right? And where we're projecting them to go in the future. So I guarantee you we are much further along in some of those areas than what you see there. That said, just inspiration, right? These are not real technologies that we're producing there. And I'm going to pause for a second, and there's a question in the background.
Was it done in sort of a parent system, or was it just in an open space?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I heard it. Was it done in a what system?
Was that kind of simulation done in like parent system or like an open space where they put on models?
So it was just a video, right? So it wasn't done at all.
If that were to be done, like what would it be done in?
I'm having a hard time hearing him back there.
If that were to be done in real life, what would it be done in?
Again, I'm not sure. So we do have at MITRE some augmented and virtual reality specialists that would be able to probably answer that question far better than I could. But I would imagine something similar to what they have set up there. But I'm certainly not knowledgeable enough to be able to answer that. Okay, so what I'm going to go ahead and do now, if there are no other questions, I'm going to start taking you through, again, when I saw that video, how it inspired me and a research program that I formed. And again, feel free to ask questions throughout, actually. And do that, right? Because I could hear you better. Okay, so again, as I mentioned, and this is not coming up on that screen. It's on my screen, but not that. So one sec, guys, having a technical difficulties here. Anybody else want to ask a question while I try to get this figured out? MITRE, good question. So MITRE, if it wasn't already conveyed, I'm not sure why this is happening. We operate 7 different federally funded research and development centers, right? So what is an FFRDC? So we're essentially trusted advisors on the behalf of the federal government. Our sole customer is the federal government. We can't work for industry or anyone else. We can partner with industry, but everything we do is actually dictated out in terms of how much we can also work by Congress. And again, was established, I think, in the 50s. And again, I'm new to MITRE, only a year there. But MIT Lincoln Laboratory, which obviously I'm sure you guys are familiar with, is also a federally funded research and development center. So very much in the same vein. Right. Other question here?
So in the video, when we were watching, we see like all these hypothetical advanced technology, like holograms and the way they interact with computers, and like it looks really far less convenient than just using a normal computer. So I have to ask, like, do you really think that you could actually advance it so that these like holograms may actually be more convenient than just using a laptop?
Okay, that's a great question. I'm going to repeat it so they can hear it and record it and correct me if I'm wrong on it. So as opposed to all the bells and whistles of these advanced technologies that they presented in the simulation or in the video, right? Is there a better way to do it or a more simplistic way to do it? And that's an open question, right? So I think that's part of the scientific research and development process that we engage in, right? So we put these out there, right? But again, testing it and doing it and developing it and doing different things helps us refine that, right? So who knows, maybe it'll look like a completely different thing, but that's part of the whole R&D process of the federal government. Next question?
So you studied the relationship between machines and humans, correct?
Yes.
So do you see in the future a potential like abuse, like where like a robot becomes smart enough, like that there's going to be like ethics regarding human abusing robots, and then ethics about robots, like laws put into place about robots abusing humans?
Yes. Okay. To repeat the question, focusing on the relationship between humans and robotics like I do, in the future, will we be seeing any ethical or legal concerns regarding those relationship dynamics? And absolutely, we already see that now. There's an annual conference that's been happening for at least 3, if not 4 years, at least that's how long I've been involved with it, called We Robot, and it's a conference full of attorneys focusing on and trying to understand and address the legal implications. Particularly, one example that comes off the top of my head is if you abuse a robot, right, like you abuse a dog, there are laws surrounding abusing that dog, right? So do the robots, like dogs, have rights, right? And again, it's more around how that impacts us as viewing and how we as humans care about that. So again, I'm not an expert in that area, but you'd be surprised what's already out there. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get through a couple of pages here, and then again, keep asking questions throughout, and hopefully all is fixed. Yay. Okay, as I kind of mentioned, just to reiterate, again, we're obviously interested in this. This is a huge area for, this is more the Department of Defense here. Coming out of what the Secretary of Defense actually calls the third offset strategy. There's only been 3 in our nation's history. First one was nuclear deterrence. As you might imagine, a pretty global impact on what happened. Second one, we'll just kind of summarize it as information technology, and again, kind of it led out to the development of GPS and a multitude of other things. And only recently in the last couple of years, under the last administration, we have the third offset strategy, which again, I summarize here as human-machine collaboration, unmanned combat teaming, assisted human operations, learning machines. So again, that autonomous systems and how we interact with them, and what are the greater benefits we can get from those. So again, as a government scientist, I hear this announcement, I'm like, human-machine collaboration, unmanned teaming. as if those two things, collaboration and teaming that I have highlighted there, are easy things to do. And again, I'm a psychologist, admittedly, and most of your projects are more engineering related, but they're not easy to do, okay? These are important questions that we have to start asking. As you imagine, as you're growing up, interacting with these technologies, and as you guys are getting older, as I'm sure you can already tell from your parents, right? Vastly different than the way they used to interact with technology, right? So there are a lot of inherent social dynamics that are hidden in that relationship that we're seeing. Amazon Echo, for example, right? Interacting with Alexa. I can only speak to my 8-year-old and how he interacts, right? Vastly different. There are a lot of social dynamics. There's a lot of social cueing that's happening in those interactions. And again, to just say, if we build it, then they will just collaborate, humans will just collaborate and team with it, no problem. It's simply not that. So what then I developed, again, this is probably, I've got 12 years of experience in trust and autonomous systems, just simply understanding the construct of how we trust, don't rely on these systems. Broadening that to the broader social dynamics, trust is one construct, right, in that social exchange relationship that we have amongst each other. But as you might imagine, it is inherent in us, and we bring those social dynamics to every interaction that we have, whether we recognize it and admit it or not, which a lot of research out there actually speaks to that. So very much looking at these social cognitive underpinnings is kind of the objective of our lab. Our approach is very much using empirical studies, fusing that social cognitive psychology, and again, that team motivation and training background that I have, and again, trying to ground it in solid theory, right? So it's that early research side. Again, what you see a lot of universities do, the government also has a lot of research labs that focus on some of that early science stuff, in addition to contracting with a lot of universities. Obviously, MIT has a whole lot of contracts with the government. And DARPA, if you're familiar with those, that's kind of our, very much the driving force of innovation for research and development in the federal government and the Defense Department. You'll see a little bit, I focus on this multimodal assessment approach, and that's essentially that analyst example that you saw, right? Collecting all this different information about them, all these biometrics, not just asking them self-report, do you trust the system, do you not, right? There's all kinds of things we need to gather about that, and a lot of different modalities to truly understand what's happening. And again, it's that unconscious social affective cues, right? So unconscious, there's a great series of research from Clifford Nass out in Stanford, who found, and again, this is older research interacting with desktop computers. He did a whole series of different studies. If you simply put participants with a blue armband and the desktop computer that they were interacting with doing a decision-aided task, right, either had a blue or a red band around it, they trust and relied on that desktop computer based on that system that they were interacting with, that decision aid system and simulation, more or less depending on if their armband color matched the desktop color, right? Then he asked, and he did a whole all different kinds of, right, similarity, dissimilarity. And then he asked them afterwards, would this affect you? Do you think you do it? No way, of course not. But the data consistently showed that we do behave in different ways. And again, my research program and laboratory focuses on what are all those other underlying aspects. So here is a great colleague of mine out at MITRE has developed a really good design content and design process focusing on that human-machine teaming aspect, right? What do we need to design into those technologies, right? Kind of, I'm going to guess, a little bit more similar to what you guys are doing on the cognitive assistance side, but getting more into understanding it from the human perspective a little bit more. But what I do in the HMSS lab is take it one step further, right? And I focus on that teaming process. What can we do with the humans to prepare them for that interaction, right? And again, that's pulling from the industrial organizational background that I have, not the human factors background, which is on the other side there, on the left that you see. Again, what are some of those context-specific aspects? What about the team climate and learning from how the user's responding and adapting to that, right? What are those social cues that cut clear across, right? Now, I don't know if you guys have heard of the concept of test, verify, validate. That's something we do, again, in the federal government. For technology, does it work, right? You have to test it, you have to verify, and you have to validate it in appropriate context, right? What we fail to do very often, right? So this is kind of my nitpicky thing to the video you saw and to that third offset strategy that you saw. We don't do that with how we interact with that technology. How is it impacting us? So again, that, if you will, the test, verify, and validate of the trust process itself. So again, that's more of my focus area. I'm going to pause for a second and see if there's any questions. Okay, so moving on to the multimodal approach and what I mean by that. So as you might imagine, there's this kind of feedback loop, right? You sense something about a person like you saw in that analyst, right? So you're getting a signal from that analyst. It's saying that it assesses it, right? Because there's a lot of noise in that signal. You have to get rid of the noise and assess, are they truly stressed? Is their stress high? Is something else going on? Is their trust low? Is their trust high? And then the system has to augment, right? So sense, assess, and augment and keep that loop going, right? Just as we do when we interact with other humans, right? So the augmentation in the video example was, okay, maybe you need to take a break. Let me take over here. Let me do this, right? That's a system doing that. How do we feel when our partners do that in our teams, right? So someone can tell that you're really stressed out that day or you've had a bad day, and then you offer to help them, right? That's a very unique relationship. That's a very intimate relationship that you have to tread carefully sometimes. You have to know enough about the person, how to engage that, how to approach them. Do they like that? Do they not? That's a lot of additional information to understand. That's where, again, what we focus here on, what you see here at the bottom, tons of technologies out there. And I'm going to guess you guys are probably more familiar with a lot of these newer technologies, newer startups doing some of this on again, that quantified self movement, what we call the quantified warrior aspect, right? Lots of biometrics out there saying we assess this, that. First of all, is it valid, right? To get to that truly assessing problem. Yeah, you can sense a whole bunch, right? But is it valid? That's the other question, right? But then what's even the hardest thing is to say, is it really truly this psychological construct that we're purporting it to be? Is it really about trust? Is it really about emotion? Stress, workload, we're a little further along with that, right? But again, there's tons of different social psychological variables that we're going to have to understand if we're going to move forward with that vision that they purport. So again, as I mentioned, lots of technologies, lots of companies, lots of folks on the government side as well, developing all these great different sensors and other kind of things to optimize that sense, assess, augment loop, right? It's the critical aspect for artificial intelligence or using machine learning algorithms, right, to personalize technology to you, right? And I'm sure, again, you guys probably know tons of examples of that. What I focus on, right, is, again, how do we simulate that intelligent machine partner of the future, because we're really not there yet, right? And how the users perceive and respond to that much more intimate connection with these types of technologies. Embodiment in the robotics literature, embodiment has been shown time and time again to elicit far more dramatic social responses. A colleague of mine that I've collaborated with many years, Scazzaletti, Dr. Scazzaletti out of the Yale Social Robotics program, he's got this great study where there was an embodied robot, right, there in the room with some students that were coming in, some Yale undergrad students, and then there was that same robot saying the same exact thing on a desktop screen or on a computer screen. And if that robot was there in the room with them and told them, I need you to throw these books in the trash. We don't need these books anymore. Throw these books in the trash. They were far more likely the students were far more likely to comply and throw books in the trash as opposed to when it was on this screen. It's still technology. It's technology whether it's here, it's technology whether it's a robot. So why in the world did they comply more with that robotic system? Because it was presence in the room. If you guys are familiar with the Milgram studies, when you hit Psych 101, maybe you'll get those, right? On compliance, which was human-to-human compliance. That translated, Skaz showed that translated into a human technology condition, right? Wow. What does that mean? So again, there's that embodiment piece that has been shown in lots of studies. But my question is, the more that these systems, again, like Amazon Echo, right? Alexa is not embodied in the sense that she's a humanoid robot, but again, knows a lot of personal things. How is that changing how we're interacting with that system? So that's what I really want to push you guys to think about. And again, I want to hear your perspective, so please speak up, even if it's at the end, about examples on this. Because it's positive and negative, right? We're not saying, especially in the federal government, right, which can seem that way, oh, we need to push technology and trust it, and this is great in every way. No, we want to truly understand both sides of the situation. So, as I mentioned earlier, we do collaborate quite extensively with industry. That's one of my focus areas. My lab is actually located at a robotics startup incubator down in the Seaport District of Boston, as opposed out in Bedford, or as opposed to kind of in the fence of Air Force. I've always had my labs out and kind of collaborating with both universities. It used to be located at Yale University, and then I moved it up to this robotics startup called Mass Robotics, because I wanted to work side by side with the leading edge of technology. What are some of those startups? What are they doing? Sometimes the government process can be really long in R&D. So this is our kind of way to kind of leapfrog some of that and work with some of the greatest minds and greatest technology that's coming out there. An example of one, we have shared problems, right? So on the one side of the screen, obviously a very military relevant problem. This is Army Research Labs. They're truly trying to develop these technologies, right? They're testing this concept. And again, when I came in and was introduced to this concept, they're focusing on developing the technology, right? Particularly that protection system that you see there as the ground robot, working with an air asset as well with that drone. But that dynamic that you see there is human-machine teaming. That warfighter's life is on the line. He has to trust both that ground system and that air asset, that they're reliable, that they're doing their job correctly, right? There's a whole dynamic going on. And when you start putting your life on the line with some of these systems, again, those social dynamics come up. Currently, today, actually for many years, bomb disposal robots. I work a lot with an iRobot that's here local in Boston. They said once when they had a robot come back that its job was to go in and detonate the bomb. The team, the bomb disposal team that had the robot do that, said when they sent it back to get repaired to iRobot, they said, we want that robot back. And they're like, oh, it doesn't matter, right? They're like, no, we want that robot back. They named it. They had all kinds of stickers on it. They personalized it, right? And they very much wanted that robot back. Now, again, as these systems get more and more intelligent than the bomb disposal robots of today, right? How is that going to ever increase how we feel and interact with these systems? Is it good? Is it bad? So again, what I'm highlighting here is this isn't just a problem for the military. This is a problem for our future. This is something we need to understand with how these technologies are being developed. Agricultural drone company, great company called American Robotics, right? Focusing on the problem with in the agricultural space. But as you can see, first when I met these guys, I was like, oh, I think there's some similarities here. Let's try to understand it. Do you have like an image or something that captures what you guys are doing? I did nothing to that. That's exactly what they sent me, and that's exactly what the Army sent me. So as you can, they even use the same stock image, right? So as you can see, dramatic similarities where at first you might assume there are none, right? But again, what I'm talking about is focusing on the future and how we're interacting with these technologies, be it in a military scenario, be it in a healthcare scenario, be it in an agricultural scenario, and of course, as you might imagine, be it in a self-driving car, right, and autonomous systems future. So I'm just going to present, hopefully not too boring for you guys. I can speed through the data if you guys don't like it. But just some preliminary findings from some very initial research we've looked at. We do have a lot of the biometrics. We haven't analyzed them yet. What I'm reporting here is just the self-report. And actually, raise your hand. Is anybody familiar with psychology research or behavioral science? Anybody? One, two, a few? Okay. Okay, so this might not be so interesting to you guys, but hopefully. But just it's pretty intuitive, right? You can see we presented many subjects, about 200 subjects with different conditions, saying in a team condition and simply highlighting, as you see there in red, we need to take action, right? I've identified personalizing, given some sense of agency to that system, right, which was just conveyed on a phone. And then in the military condition, right? So looking at the agricultural condition, they saw those same images. Looking at the military condition, did the same thing in both of those contexts, right? But again, personalizing it, giving it a sense of agency, and giving it that, imbuing those social cues in that interaction, right? That's all we did. That's it. What you see circled there, they saw those images, and they saw this text with a little bit of background story beforehand to let them know what they needed to do in the scenario. And as you can see there on the right-hand side of the screen, when we simply ask them, we don't directly ask them, do you trust this? It's a series of questions, and that's part of behavioral science, where we get at a particular psychological construct through asking these questions. They were significantly more likely to trust the condition when we did that personalization and that imbued that sense of agency and team effectiveness that we had. So again, already that's them even admitting, right? That's them saying it was between subjects condition, meaning you're either in one condition or you're not. You don't experience both. So again, already seeing that, right? And this very, very simple manipulation in terms of how we present it in the text that they're seeing. So again, something to think about for you COG assistant folks, right? Just simply the wording that you use can actually have dramatic effects. We didn't see, these are error bars when they touch. It means that there's not a significant relationship. When there's a gap, it is a significant relation, is a significant relationship. So on the military side, we didn't see anything, and we were like, I wonder what that's about. So we dug a little deeper. As you can see here, we reran, had another 100 subjects. Trust findings, again, the same, no difference. No, wouldn't trust between that. But the reliability findings were significant, right? So we were getting at something a little deeper, right? Do you trust, do you interact with this stuff versus do you rely on it, which is really the purpose of why autonomous system developers want to know about trust, right? Trust, I may trust it, right? Or I may not trust it, but do I rely on it? That's really what most of them want to get at, right? And again, because that's a step removed from the more obvious thing, do you trust it or not, right? And particularly with a drone in a military setting, as you might imagine, the trust is going to, it's pretty well known, right, that those are not positive things from society's level. And again, these were not military subjects at all. But again, then they were more likely to rely on that system simply because we said, we, right? I will take action. We can do this, right? And again, dramatic differences for something so simple, and it's pulling at us as social emotional beings, whether we realize it in the interactions with these technologies or not. So again, that's kind of a highlight, to just kind of highlight what we do in the lab and how we believe in going back and forth quite a bit, as opposed to being isolated and doing these lab studies. The other aspect that we very much focus on is getting out in the field, testing it with real people, right? Testing it with what we call subject matter experts, be that the farmers, right? We'll be collecting data with real farmers, operating the drone, because again, this is a commercial company that's out there and trying to sell this drone system to farmers. We are going in, partnering with them and asking some of these questions and following up and doing some analysis and some data collection on how they feel about interacting with these systems based on our preliminary findings on the online study. And again, we're doing that also in field exercises. There's a multitude of different military exercises that are testing these technologies all the time. I encourage you guys to learn about those. If you're curious about this, see where you can participate, see where you can do some of this stuff, because again, what you saw in the video, right, is a vision for the future. But in these field exercises is where we're testing some of the closest things we have, right? Obviously, you can't get access to a lot of them, but some of them you'd be surprised with if you start working on projects, start partnering. I'd be happy to answer any questions about that or help you guys get connected to some of those opportunities. Okay, so this is my last slide, kind of focusing on that win-win partnership aspect, right? That's what I very much want to do. It's not just isolated federal government kind of questions. We want to focus on that future for all of us, right? What are we facing? What's coming down the pike, and how do we prepare for it? And then tech transfer, with that meaning focusing on, again, where can we take some like that agricultural technology, right? Or technologies that you guys will soon be developing if you start your own startup companies, right? You guys, after this, you guys might have great ideas and go right out if you're not doing it already, right? We on the federal government side are very much interested in that, right? And trying to address these very common problems that we have. So if any of you guys do that, please definitely follow up with me on that. And again, just the next steps, highlighting how we very much get out into the field scenario and try to really want to understand what's happening in the real world. And that is it. Are there any other questions? Oh, thank you, thank you. All right. Oh, yep.
Simulation and you measure their biometrics like heart rate and stuff like that. Will those be a good representation of sort of like a real life scenario? Because when they're in the training facility, they know like whether it's like whether they don't actually, deep down, they know at some point that they're not actually in real danger. So like how does that training really translate over to a real life scenario where sort of like their biometrics can be different because they know that they could actually die out there?
Yeah, absolutely. So to reiterate, and correct me if I'm wrong on anything, how much does that training scenario that's artificial, augmented virtual reality in the situation transfer over to the real world, and how many of those effects that we're seeing carry through? So I can actually answer that surprisingly a lot. We know that from today because there actually are some of these live field training facilities out in Edwards Air Force Base. There's a huge facility where, again, it's all this, the warfighters get sent in to kind of go through these houses. There's all these fake, and I'm sure you've probably seen those examples on TV. And there are training experts that go there and have found repeatedly that, again, it simulates far better than doing it just, a paper pencil or anything. Now, it's not perfect, true. There's going to be some differences, but you'd be surprised, as you imagine when you play some of these video games and different things, the more immersed you are in that reality, the tighter the effects are, right, into it. So again, not perfect, but far better than what we have. And as that technology advances and advances, as you might imagine, it's going to get even closer. Yes?
Seeing text on the screen, hearing a voice that's digitalized, and then hearing an actual voice that you might expect from another person.
Yeah, okay, so to repeat, are there differences between essentially like the modalities of that interaction, whether it's on a screen, whether it's voice, or kind of that embodied thing? Again, I think the reference that I mentioned to Skaz's work out at Yale Social Robotics Lab kind of highlights that. So yeah, and there's lots of other research as well. And that's exactly why I want to take it that phase 2 step beyond and get into the field to ask those specific questions and tease that apart in the analyses. So yeah, great question.
Have you done any research that's not on someone's preliminary like feelings of something? So the example we had was their first interaction with the system. Like, what about over weeks or months?
Yeah, okay, so to repeat, kind of longitudinal assessments over time, right? The data you guys saw today focusing on that first interaction, what I call the introduction phase of these technologies, right? Are we looking over weeks or months? Great question. That's exactly what we're focused on doing. We're not there yet, but again, we're focusing on this introduction phase, but what I call that climate management in that model, that's the next phase, right? Because that is a continuous thing, right? And trust will ebb and flow depending on all kinds of things. So that's a very important thing that we do plan to look at. Well, lots of questions. I'm just going to work my way over. Yes, you.
So really studying biology but in obviously as we built up the videos, some of them are more hopeful than others. So what do you see in terms of near and distant future? What technology should we be looking out for?
If I'm understanding correctly, out of the video or out of kind of the technologies that I'm aware of and we're doing on the federal government side, what should you guys be looking out for kind of nearer term? I would say, and again, I'm not the expert on all those technologies by any means, right? But at least the thing I've been seeing a lot of, and that's closer for lots of legal reasons and social reasons, right, is the augmented and virtual reality technology, right? Really pushing that forward. I'd like to say the vehicles with the autonomous cars, right? I'd like to say some of the UAVs, right, with Amazon delivery, but as you might imagine, there's lots of legal and infrastructure hurdles to overcome. although the technology could be there, right? The actual systems could be there, but because it also requires infrastructure, policy, all these other things that can kind of hold some of that advancement back more than the technology itself. Okay, I'm going to move over. I think I saw, okay, hand right there.
A lot of sensors that can monitor the cognitive state of the user. Well, a lot of now they have a lot of benefits for government applications. But how do you address the privacy and surveillance concerns that come along with it?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a huge area of concern. So to repeat, how do you address the privacy implications that go along and security implications that go along with collecting some of that data, right? Huge problem. I don't focus on that in my particular research, but fortunately there are a lot of folks that are trying to understand that, and a lot of folks on the policy side that are certainly trying to understand that. We do collaborate with a lot of things, collaborate with Facebook, for example. As you might imagine, it's a problem they're having. So that's a common problem. Again, thinking of that future world, right? That's a common problem, both on the military side, the federal government, healthcare, and again, on the commercial side. So that's a really common problem that we're all trying to understand. And fortunately, there are some groups doing that. Okay, up and back there.
With human machines, do you think that the uncanny valley will eventually become a problem? And if so, what's the way to address that?
Okay, so with human machine teams, will the uncanny valley eventually become a problem? How many know what the uncanny valley is? Oh, great, great, great. Okay, so I guess I'll just say for those of you that don't, right, there's essentially the creepy factor, right, where it's so close to being real, but it's not quite, and it's like, yeah, the uncanny valley, right? What I've been hearing, and again, I haven't run any of these studies myself, but what I've been hearing for some of the human-robotic interaction experts that I work with a lot, that's somewhat going away, right? And I think it's dependent on the new generations, right? Where, again, we're getting more comfortable and getting exposed to some of these things on a far more regular basis than we used to. Again, this is coming from conversations I've had with a lot of colleagues, not empirical research that I've read, so I don't want to put too much on that answer, but at least that's what I've heard in the conversations. Great question, though. I'm going to go with you.
So I know obviously during your presentation you were talking a lot about your work at MITRE and your research right now on cognitive abilities. Could you possibly touch upon your research before that with the Air Force and how it connects to your current position at MITRE?
Yeah, so how my current research with MITRE connects to the previous research that I've done. It's the same thing. I've only been with MITRE for about a year, and they actually acquired, if you will, when they hired me, the lab. I had already established it at Mass Robotics. I had, as I mentioned, I was at Yale for 7 years, where the lab I had there doing this research, working with Scazzaletti that I mentioned, and a lot of other folks out there, and then transitioned it, as I mentioned, up to Mass Robotics to try to really understand the emerging tech industry a little bit better. That can move way faster than we can on the government side. And then MITRE, I just was interested in that because, again, as I keep mentioning, it's a fundamental problem in society in our future, not just a problem on the military side. So I joined MITRE, took the whole research lab, all the equipment, all my team, everything, to try to expand beyond, again, just that military focus, because MITRE operates 7 federally funded research and development centers, only one of which is really focusing on the military, and then the others are healthcare, Medicare, Medicaid, all kinds of the judicial system, all kinds of different areas of the federal government. So it's kind of the same, though. You, here in blue?
How do you think that this research between the robot and the computer will affect devices such as Siri or the Amazon Echo?
So how does this research affect devices such as Siri or Amazon Echo? As you imagine, I use those examples all the time, right? Amazon and Siri, they're not asking those questions, right? They're not asking the human questions. They're developing the technologies and asking user questions in terms of simplicity of use and accuracy, but not asking those deeper behavioral or social psychological questions, right, of interacting and what are those impacts, right? So that's why I look to partner with folks such as Amazon and Facebook and all these different folks, right? Because some of them aren't asking those questions, right? And so I believe they should be.
And it had a lot of technologies in there. And the
the 5 years, there's a lot of changes and probably some kind of difference in the ethics, and probably not gonna have that vision now, probably for the future. How would you say to those people at the Department of Defense or the public in general, how is the difference in your vision is now? How is your vision now? What is different and what is not?
My vision or their vision?
Your vision.
Okay. If I'm understanding, I'll repeat it, so let me know if I'm too off the mark. How is my vision different 5 years on, right, in researching and trying to investigate this area? I would say I feel very, very much the same and much stronger, if anything. I've been fortunate to do a lot of speaking events such as this, and I've been fortunate to grow a lot of really unique collaborations with industry out there. And again, it just keeps coming back, right, saying that this is a real problem and we need to start addressing it. So if anything, I've doubled down on what I do. And again, fortunate with MITRE now to be able to spread that to a much wider audience versus just within the military. I will give the military credit, though. We have what's called the Defense Innovation Board. I do work with those folks. The chairman of the board is Eric Schmidt from Google. So I would say on both sides, right, the government and industry, leaders of industry, we're very much focusing on this. And they call out this problem a lot themselves. So, all right. I think that one other question here.
Do you foresee artificial intelligence taking over decision-making rather than just being a cognitive assistant in the battlefield?
Okay, I'm going to repeat that. Do I see artificial intelligence taking over decision-making rather than just cognitive assistance in the battlefield? I would say you guys might have a different view, right? But cognitive assistance in general, ultimately, hopefully, are going to integrate artificial intelligence or machine learning right at this phase. I don't think we're quite at the true artificial intelligence phase, right? Lots of good machine learning algorithms that take a lot of training data and all that, so keep pushing the bounds there. So I kind of see them as one and the same, right? So the cognitive assistance, an aspect of hopefully that they're going to be using in the future, right, as at least the cognitive assistance that we're looking at are certainly pulling on machine learning algorithms to improve, right, and personalize, right? So that's very important. As far as will it take over decision-making in the battlefield? I'm going to say a resounding no, because we simply will not, right? The human always has to be ultimately in that loop, right? There's some things certainly that maybe, AI, ML can do on its own, but ultimately, especially if you might imagine some particular scenarios, it always needs to be the human there. Okay, well, this was great. If there are no other questions, I don't think I heard from a single woman. Any girls in the audience want to ask a question? Anyone? Come on. One of you? All right, well, hopefully you come up and talk to me afterwards. Again, I really want to encourage everybody to get into some of this research. So please feel free to come down and talk to me afterwards. Thank you, guys.
Hold on.
Can you just hold on for a second? No. Oh. Okay, just go. Let's all go. Come on, please. Go. Okay. Go. No. Just all gather. Just take a picture.
Everybody get in.
No, come on. Why don't we all get together? Yeah. Oh. There we go.
All right, guys, you ready? I know I said this yesterday and nobody listened, but I was going to let the front go first, and there's nobody in the front. So you front guys are lucky. Go first. Hey, you're not front. You're not front. You're not front. You all went yesterday when I said back. All right, right side can go. Hey, that's left. My right. My right.